Welcome to Apologetics from the Attic, the show that seeks to teach and defend the Christian faith in a post-Christian culture. And now, broadcasting from an attic in an undisclosed location somewhere outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, here is your host, Dave Lewis.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Apologetics from the Attic. And today we're going to continue our series on the Biblical Theology of Penal Substitutionary Atonement. Last time we went through the book of Exodus, and now we have arrived at the book of Leviticus, which has killed more reading through the Bible cover to cover than any book of the Bible. By the time you get here, you get bogged down with everything, all the details of all the different things that are in the ceremonial law of Israel. But we want to take a look and see what it says as we build our case biblically for the penal substitutionary atonement. And remember, what we're doing is we're walking through from Genesis and moving forward. That's what biblical theology does. It looks at a biblical doctrine in chronological order of the Bible and see how the Bible develops that doctrine. So without further ado, let's take a look. So remember, we ended Exodus with God declaring to the people that if he dwelt among them, he would consume them. And by Moses' intercession, which traces back to the patriarchal blessing, is where that idea is introduced. Remember, Abraham was the first in the Bible that we saw that interceded for another when he interceded for Lot, his nephew. And his nephew was rescued from Egypt from Sodom because of the intercession of Abraham. And we also saw, and this is going to come up again, we had the foundation laid in Genesis as well, that the death of an animal in the place of the sinner, the penalty of death is transferred to the animal instead of to the sinner. And we furthermore saw that in the story of Adam and Eve. We saw that when God threatened death the day you eat of it, and the animal was slain in their place. And we saw that also in the offering of Isaac, where the ram was sacrificed in the place of Isaac. The language is very clear. And now we're going to get in Leviticus a detailed explanation. And what's the point of the book of Leviticus? You can summarize it very easily. How can a holy God dwell in the midst of a sinful people and not break out against them in his wrath and anger? Well, the book of Leviticus answers that question. So if you're watching, if you're listening, on your screen I have Leviticus. And first thing we want to do is look at chapter 1, verse 3 and 4. And we start right off in Leviticus that lists all the different type of offerings. Now, we're not going to go into each one in detail. Let's just look at this first one for the burnt offering. So it says, "If the Lord called Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, When any one of you brings an offering to the Lord, you shall bring your offering of livestock from the herd or from the flock. If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he shall offer a male without blemish." Many have noted that's important. It can't be a blemished offering. He shall bring it. Wait, what do you mean it's unresponsive? Never mind, there's something going on there. He shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting, he may be accepted before the Lord. Now this is very important, verse 4. This theme comes up a lot in Leviticus, and we have to understand what the meaning of it is. He shall lay his hand. Hold on, I might have to restart this. I don't know what happened. Why did it shut down Bible Gateway like that? Okay, hopefully it won't do that again. I don't know what's going on with it. It's saying it's unresponsive and it's waiting. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay. He shall lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted for him to make atonement for him. So the significance of the laying of the hands on the head of the burnt offering is very important. Okay, hang on. I'm going to have to restart Chrome. Give me 1 second. I don't know why it's doing that. I apologize. And I'm not going to go back and edit this out. Let's just bear with me. Leviticus 1. I don't know why it's doing this. It's saying the page is unresponsive, but the page is loaded. I still see the swirl up at the top, though, so I don't know if that has something to do with it. Let's just keep going. So what's the significance of laying hands on the offering. So I think it becomes clear that what this means is the offerer is identifying with the animal in such a way by laying the hands on it physically. And it's clear it is accepted before the Lord for the offerer, meaning that the penalty of death that should fall upon the sinner has been transferred to this animal. And that becomes very important because that is the meaning of the sacrificial system. And that is what penal substitutionary atonement picks up on because of texts like these. And then, of course, what is the important thing? The blood. So the blood is drained before the Lord, and this blood is thrown against the sides of the altar and in different places. And then it's very important that this offering is consumed completely. It's completely consumed. So many of the other offerings can be eaten. The priests get the food from it to support them, et cetera, et cetera. The worshiper can eat it sometimes. Depends on the type of offering. But the consumption of the offering is important too, because this is completely consumed by God. Thus, his anger, which is many times likened to a flame of fire, the flame of fire consumes the sacrifice, so that the death threatened upon the sinner for the penalty of his sin is transferred onto the offering instead. So we want to see that. Now, we could go all the way through a bunch of these offerings, but let's look at chapter 4. So let's take a look here. We have the law for burnt offerings, for grain offerings, for peace offerings, chapter 3 for sin offerings, chapter 4. And I want you to see the same thing in the sin offerings. So the same thing with the sin offering, 435. Wait, is it 435? Did I write that down wrong? Yeah, and his fat shall he remove, as the fat of the lamb is removed from the sacrifice of peace offerings, and the priest shall burn it on the altar on top of the Lord's food offerings, and the priest shall make atonement for him for sin which he has committed, and he shall be forgiven. Well, there's the term, make atonement. So this is penal substitutionary atonement. So this is the explanation that what does the atonement do? Well, it has to do with the sin he's committed, and it has to do with the forgiveness of that sin. So the animal being slain, and it's also very important. Remember what we said was established about the Levites, both in Genesis and Exodus. Those who are overseeing this ritual are the Levites. The Levites who hold in their hand the weapon of God's wrath, which we see pronounced by Jacob in the blessing and curse at the end of Genesis. And then we saw that with the ordination of the sons of Levi in the Levitical tribe in Exodus. And it says they were ordained to the Lord. And now they are in their ministry now. And they are offering these sacrifices. And one of the key distinctions between penal substitutionary atonement and the other theories of atonement is the simple idea of, does the atonement impact subjectively the offerer or objectively the one who it's offered to, namely God and God's wrath? Because many of the other theories of atonement do not even recognize any objective effect of the atonement, of the sacrifice, upon the Lord and upon his wrath. They would say God is love. God doesn't have wrath. That's an ancient concept of pagan deities. That's not how we're to view God. And they will only recognize some kind of subjective change in the one who offers it, and that's why God forgives them. But I don't think the Bible will bear that out. And we'll get into that more deeply later once we get through the biblical theology of this and once we get into some arguments against it and different things. This thing is doing this again. It's saying the page is unresponsive. And it keeps, I don't know if it's the ads, it's not loading the ads all the way or something. This is frustrating. Right when I decided to do this, of course, something's got to go wrong, right? You can wait for it to become responsive. I guess I'll just keep pressing wait. Okay. So then we have chapter 6, verse 24. Let's see. We have Leviticus 4 was about... Oh, now it won't even let me click on anything in the page. Oh my goodness. Sorry, guys. Frustrating here. Don't know why all of a sudden it wants to do that to me when I'm trying to make this video for you guys. Let's try one more time. I guess I could find a different Bible software, but man, that's super frustrating. Yeah, let's do Leviticus 1. It's going to do it again, I can tell. I can definitely tell it's going to do it again. Then chapter 6 is about the priests and the offerings of the priest and the offerings they make regularly. And look at 6:24. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the law of the sin offering. In the place where the burnt offering is killed shall the sin offering be killed before the Lord. It is most holy. The priest who offers it for sin shall eat it. In a holy place it shall be eaten in the court of the tent of meeting. Whoever touches its flesh shall be holy, and when any of its blood is splashed on a garment, you shall wash that on which it is splashed in a holy place. The earthenware vessel where it is boiled shall be broken, but if it is boiled in a bronze vessel, that shall be scoured and rinsed in water. Every male among the priests may eat of it. It is most holy. But no sin offering shall be eaten from which any blood is brought into the tent of meeting. To make atonement in the holy place, it shall be burned up with fire. So the effect, the impact of this sacrifice is so immense that special care has to be taken when blood is splashed on it or someone who touches its flesh. They actually shall be holy. Just wanted to point that out. So there's something powerful about this sacrifice and the blood of this offering. And of course, that's where we get into the New Testament, where we have the sorry about that. Okay, I think it stopped. And we have the the blood of Christ being spoken of so often. The power of Christ's blood. We get a type of that in this thing. The effect of the blood being splashed on something or touching something or someone touching the sacrifice. It makes everything holy that it touches. But notice the blood that's brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement for the holy place. So there's 3 levels. There's the court outside where the altar is and where the worshiper can come. But then there's the holy place, and then as we're going to see in a moment, there's the Holy of Holies, where only the priest goes in once a year on the Day of Atonement. And that's the text we're really going to put some focus on. All right, then we have Leviticus 6 we were on, 7, the guilt offering, and then we have in chapter 8, the consecration of Aaron and his sons. So then we have all this information that Aaron and his sons, Aaron who's going to become the high priest, they are ordained in a special manner. And of course, the whole point of this is there's blood placed on their earlobe and on their thumb and on their toe. I mean, all this is to remind them of the blood that's spilled. And this goes all the way back to Genesis 3, I believe, and moving forward. The threatened penalty upon Adam was death. And this death is taken care of. The penalty is by God's mercy in providing a seed. And that's what all this is building up to, the proto-evangelium we talked about, Genesis 3:15, the first gospel, where we see this is all building up to Christ being sacrificed on the cross. The blood is what matters here. The animal is sacrificed in the place of Aaron and his sons because they are sinners. They cannot stand in the presence of a holy God without being consumed unless they stand in the midst of these sacrifices, and their sin is taken care of by this substitute victim. It's very important. And then we have the next story. That was the consecration, and then the Lord accepts Aaron's offering. And then we have this story in Leviticus 10, which we have to take a look at real quick. Because right in the midst of, we have all this discussion of 9 chapters of what each sacrifice is. You lay your hand on the sacrifice, and then the sacrifice is killed, and then things are done with the blood and various things in order for the presence of God. Remember, what's this all about? How can the presence of a holy God be in the midst of a sinful people and not consume them? And it's through the offerings. But then we have this story. Now, Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, Each took his censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it and offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord said, among those who are near me I will be sanctified, and before all the people I will be glorified." And Aaron held his peace. So apparently Aaron was upset about this. These are his two sons. And his two sons were just killed by the Lord. Fire came out before the Lord and consumed them. So they offered unauthorized fire. Whatever they did not come to the Lord with the correct procedure, and this led to their death. So just this little story is just showing you the holiness of God, and he's not to be trifled with. And that's the sense we're supposed to get. God is holy. He is to be feared. His wrath can break out at any moment, not because he's some irrational pagan deity, but because he dwells in holiness. And he's dealing with us who are sinful and have violated his commandments and deserve the threatened death that was threatened upon Adam and Eve moving forward. And the other thing, when I was studying this, I didn't really make this connection. I don't know if it is a connection. But you have two individuals dying before the Lord because of their actions. In the New Testament, what do we have in the book of Acts? We have Annas and Sapphira, is that their name? The two who are dropped dead before the Lord, before the apostles, for lying. And it is in the matter of offerings, right? They're bringing offerings into the church, and they're lying about how much they gave. They're acting like they gave everything, but they kept some back for themselves. And they die before the Lord, and there's two of them that die in the matter of making an offering. So I thought that was an interesting maybe connection between the book of Acts and the New Covenant and this Old Covenant text, maybe a type and antitype type of thing of what's going on in the early church. But that was quite interesting. So that was Leviticus 10. Then we have the clean and unclean animals, purification after childbirth, chapter 12, laws about leprosy. This is where people really get bogged down. Laws for cleansing lepers, laws about bodily discharges. There's all kinds of various laws about cleanliness. And why is this important? Well, because it seems like God not only dwells in moral purity, he dwells in ceremonial purity. He dwells in a purity that transcends any of the things. Like, these are all things from the curse, right? I think if there wasn't a curse, there wouldn't be leprosy. There wouldn't be like mold and mildew. There's all kinds of stuff about mold and mildew in there and different things that you have to clean, and contact with a dead body. These are all things that flow from the curse. So even in these regulations and rules, we see God providing his atonement, his mercy, his laws that directly deal with the curse and the effects of the curse on the cursed ground and the cursed earth that we dwell on because of God's judgment. Okay, now we have the Day of Atonement, and this is what we really wanted to focus on in this video, because this is a very important, the author to Hebrews really takes this and shows us that this should be one of our primary understandings of the work of Christ, that he is the one who fulfills the role of the high priest in the new covenant. He is the order of Melchizedek who is made a priest, and he is going to fulfill all these things. All right. Leviticus 16:1. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they drew near before the Lord and died. And so this is interesting. What's the context for this Day of Atonement being laid out? It's right after the death of the sons of Aaron. And the Lord spoke to Moses in light of that event. So it's very important. That event's right in the background. Tell Aaron your brother not to come at any time in the holy place inside the veil, before the mercy seat that is on the ark, so that he may not die. For I will appear in the cloud over the mercy seat. But in this way Aaron shall come to the holy place with a bull from the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall put on the holy linen coat and shall have the linen undergarment on his body. He shall tie the linen sash around his waist and wear the linen turban. These are the holy garments. He shall bathe his body in water and put them on. He shall take from the congregation of the people of Israel 2 male goats for a sin offering and 1 ram for a burnt offering. Okay, so Moses is instructed. So this is the holy place. This is the Holy of Holies, it's called. So we have the courtyard, we have the holy place, and we have the Holy of Holies. The holy place, the place inside the veil. So there's a veil, if you're not familiar with it, the construction of the tabernacle. There's this, if you walk into the tabernacle, there's a first room you walk into that has the table for the showbread and the burning incense and things like this and these different things. But then there's a veil, and behind the veil is the Ark of the Covenant, and it has what's called on it a mercy seat. Okay? And that's on the Ark. And Aaron is not supposed to go in there whenever he wants. He's only supposed to go in there when the Lord instructs him to, and these are the instructions that are being given. Okay? So what's he taking from the Israelites for this particular instruction? He's taking 2 goats and 1 ram. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. So typical sin offering, Aaron is making atonement for his own sin, slaughtering the first bull as a sin offering for himself, laying his hands on it, confessing his sins over it, and then the bull is slaughtered, and death is dealt to the bull rather than to Aaron. This is the whole point of the ceremony. Then he shall take the 2 goats and set them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall cast lots over the 2 goats, one lot for the Lord and the other lot for Azazel. Now this is a whole interesting thing that we don't have to get into. The meaning of Azazel is uncertain, possibly the name of a place or a demon, traditionally a scapegoat. So the whole debate is this the name of a place, or is this Azazel some kind of demon? And there's all kinds of debate over what that means. But regardless, there's 2 goats, and the lots are cast over them. So the one is selected to be sacrificed on the altar, and the other one is led out into the wilderness and the scapegoat. We'll get into that in a moment. And Aaron shall present the goat on which the lot fell for the Lord and use it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement over it. Then it may be sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. Okay? Aaron shall present the bull as a sin offering for himself and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall kill the bull as a sin offering for himself, and he shall take a censer full of coals of fire from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of sweet incense beaten small, and he shall bring it inside the veil, and put the incense on the fire before the Lord, and the cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is over the testimony, so that he does not die. So the holiness of this place is so immense that even after Aaron has made atonement for his own sin, he can still be struck down by God in the holy place, even if he is fully atoned for in his sin by the sacrifice. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the front of the mercy seat on the east side. And in front of the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. So why is this important? Because this term mercy seat, which is brought into the Greek Septuagint as the term hilasterion, and then of course Paul in Romans 3:25, when he speaks of the work of Christ, he calls Jesus Christ a hilasterion. Because remember, Paul's working primarily with the Greek Septuagint when he quotes Old Testament texts. So Christ is called this thing, the mercy seat. So Christ is offered as a propitiation, a hilasterion, a mercy seat to God in Romans 3:25. So that's why this is very important, because the New Testament sees this as the explanation for the sacrifice of Christ and what he accomplished by his shedding of blood on the cross. So that blood is brought in not just to make atonement for the worshiper, but to also make atonement directly in the presence of God for the people. And this only happens once a year. The rest of the sacrifices, none of the blood is taken into the Holy of Holies, where the ark is. Blood is taken into the holy place, the room before the Holy of Holies, before the veil, but not into the behind the veil itself. It's quite interesting. And when he has made an end of atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall present the live goat. So listen to this. This is a very important part. And Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all of the iniquities of the people of Israel and all their transgressions, all their sins. So there you have the explicit statement that what's happening when the hand is laid on the animal. He confesses over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel and all their transgressions, all their sins. So there's something going on where the physical touch of the animal along with the confession of sin is creating some kind of symbol that God wants us to learn about, of what atonement is. And what this is it's clearly the confession of sins onto the animal. He confesses it over the animal, and there's something going on where there's a transference now. So the goat represents, because remember, according to the author of Hebrews, none of these sacrifices could ultimately address sin because they're just animals. They are pointing the way toward Christ, the God-man, who his sacrifice once for all takes care of what these animal sacrifices are pointing to. So he confesses his sins on it by placing his hands on it, and he shall put them on the head of the goat. So it's very clear. There's a very clear where the sins are put on the head of the goat. It's quite interesting, right? And I see what's happening. When I try to highlight it, it messes up the thing. Okay, so I can't do any highlights. I need to quit. I just do that instinctively. I want to highlight a verse for some reason that most people probably can't even see that I'm highlighting it. Okay, so let me reload here. I figured out the problem. I can't. Come on. I'm sorry, guys. This Bible Gateway is really causing me some problems here. Bible Gateway. Leviticus 16. Okay. Where were we? So it's very explicit language, is it not? Confess over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel, and he shall put them on the head of the goat and send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a man who is in readiness. The goat shall bear all their iniquities on itself to a remote area. He shall let the goat go free in the wilderness. So many have, just again, the little technicalities here of this debate. Many have debated whether the term mercy seat, hilasterion, in Romans 3:25 should be translated with the term expiation or propitiation. And in ancient Greek, classical Greek, and Koine Greek, those two ideas could be expressed by that word hilasterion. There's been word studies done about how that's been viewed, and there's evidence for both. And what do they mean? Well, propitiation is the idea that there is actually an objective accomplishment of the deity, that the deity is propitiated. There's an objective change in the attitude of the deity toward the offender. He's propitiated him. And then we could get into some other uses where if you owe somebody a debt, for example, and you have to propitiate the person because you have to satisfy the debt. And it's not a subjective change in you. It's an objective payment to the one who has been wronged and owed the debt. The idea of ransom actually carries the same meaning, which we'll get into when we get into the other metaphors that point to penal substitutionary atonement. But in this instance, propitiation is a very important word because it does capture what I think is a biblical teaching of, we saw in Exodus, where God is holy and his anger will consume, but his anger can be propitiated, satisfied by the death of a victim in their place. Now, many would deny that this is the biblical teaching, but I think we've seen pretty clearly, especially in Exodus, that is the biblical teaching. That God is holy, his wrath and anger can be aroused, but it can be placated, satisfied by the offering of the sacrifice. And then we have the term expiation. Well, expiation is the idea that the reason why God's wrath doesn't come against us is not because of some objective change outside of us in the matter of how God relates to us. It's a subjective change where our sin is removed from God's presence in some way, and that is how we are accepted and forgiven. We don't have to have God's wrath dealt with many people who would prefer expiation. They don't have that view of God. They would say God is love. He doesn't have wrath like a pagan deity. He's not like that. He's just loving and caring and kind, and that's his main attributes. But what needs to happen is our sin needs to be removed from his presence, and that's expiation. It's the removal of the offense rather than the punishment, transference and punishment of the offense. But I think the Day of Atonement shows us both of these ideas. Now, I think both goats represent the one work that's happening on the great Day of Atonement to make atonement for the people. But the first offering, the one that's slain, that is emphasizing the propitiation. But then the expiation is represented by the second goat. The sin is placed on the head of the goat, and it is released into the wilderness, meaning it's now outside the camp. It's been taken away and removed from the presence of God. So I believe that's also something that we need to take seriously. And Aaron shall come into the tent of meeting, and shall take off the linen garments that he put on when he went into the holy place, and shall leave them there. He shall bathe his body in water in the holy place, and put on his garments, and come out and offer his burnt offering and an offering for the people, and make atonement for himself and his people. The fat of the sin offering she shall burn on the altar, and he who lets the goat go to Azazel shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterwards he may come to the camp. And the bull for the sin offering and the goat for the sin offering, whose blood was brought in to make atonement for the holy place, shall be carried outside the camp. Their skin and their flesh and their dung shall be burned up with fire. And he who burns it shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterwards he may come in the camp. So all these regulations are just hammering home the serious matter of ministering in the presence of a holy God, and the things that have to take place even after you do this to maintain holiness, to maintain sanctity in the presence of this holy, awesome God that is dwelling in the midst of them, even though he threatened that he would not, because they are a stiff-necked people and he would consume them on the way. But these are the means of God not consuming his people. And of course, this is all a setup for the ultimate fulfillment of this, who is Jesus Christ, who is sent by God to ultimately bring us forgiveness of sins and the ability to be in his presence. And then we have several other chapters. Love your neighbor as yourself, of course, as in Leviticus 19. We have many issues about sexual relations, a whole catalog of the forbidden sexual sins, including homosexuality, including bestiality, including all kinds of different incestuous relationships that are not permitted, punishment for child sacrifice, etc., etc. There's all kinds of things that we see here. Hey guys, sorry about that. I had to take a phone call. It's going to seem disjointed, but we're going to wrap this one up. I was going to do some other stuff, but we'll save it for another episode, make this a shorter episode. But the rest of Leviticus, after these different various laws, punishment for child sacrifice, the feasts are very important to understand what's going on. The feasts are reiterated, and remember the feasts are celebrated annually. Passover, the tabernacles and all those different ones, Pentecost, just to remind the people what the Lord did for them to bring them out of Egypt. That's a huge theme, especially in Deuteronomy. Remember the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, to remember what God had done for them in their redemption. And then year of Jubilee, and then of course you have the blessings for obedience and punishment for disobedience, which still hangs over. They're still under the Mosaic covenant. And even though these atonement sacrifices are being made, they are still threatened with what will happen for obedience and what will happen for disobedience. But of course, this as well is a type of what Christ will come and do, because Christ will both be the perfectly obedient Israelite as our representative, and he will also bear the punishment that we deserve. The curses that are threatened in Leviticus 26 will be borne by our substitute, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world, Jesus Christ. And next time, well, I want to give a book recommendation here. I haven't brought this one up, but if you really want to study this issue and get deep into it, there's this book that came out. When did this thing come out? And it made a splash when it came out. Oh, way back in 2007. Wow. It's called Pierce for Our Transgressions, Rediscovering the Glory of Penal Substitution. Pierce for Our Transgression. If you can buy them. I think I got this one from, what's that online book place? Thrift Books. Got a nice copy, used copy, but it was in really good condition. Steve Jeffrey, Michael Ove, Andrew Sack. This is put out by Crossway, I believe. Forward by John Piper. Excellent book. And we're going to read portions of this. Maybe at the beginning of the next episode, before we get into Numbers, we can read some of the stuff they say about Leviticus, about the Day of Atonement, because they have some really good stuff in here. But next, we're on to the Book of Numbers. The Book of Numbers has some very important information about penal substitution that we need to see, especially when you get to the story of Phineas. But there's also several. So what Numbers does, just to preview, you have the sacrificial system set up, and you have the means of atonement through this regimented sacrificial system. But then in the book of Numbers, you have these stories where God's wrath breaks out among the camp, and there's atonement made. There's means of appeasing God's wrath and anger that breaks out in the camp that is separate from the tabernacle and temple and the altar. And it ends up being Moses, and then the story that's really definitive is Phineas and what he does to satisfy the wrath of God. And it's actually called an atonement. So that's all I'll tell you. But it's a really cool story where what Phineas does. You can go ahead and read it for yourself. Look at Numbers. I forget which chapter it is. It's later in Numbers, the story of Phineas and what he does to bring atonement for the people as God's anger is breaking out because of their sin in the camp. So it's interesting. You have this setup of the sacrificial system in Leviticus, but then you have these instances back to the patriarchal blessing and curse, back to the Levitical priesthood and their role, because Phineas is a Levite, and all these things that go into this. But and of course Moses is a Levite as well. He's from the tribe of Levi. So it's interesting, and we'll keep building up this doctrine. I hope if this is the first video you caught, go back and listen to Genesis, Exodus. Now we're on Leviticus. We'll be on Numbers. We'll hit Deuteronomy, and then we'll move forward in the biblical text and hit all the points of the Old Testament that inform us on penal substitutionary atonement before we get into the New Testament. So this is going to take a while, but it's definitely a worthwhile study to do, to study what the Bible teaches about this glorious doctrine of penal substitutionary atonement. So thank you for watching today. If you found me on YouTube, I'm on iTunes and Spotify. If you found me on iTunes and Spotify, I'm on YouTube. Like, subscribe, and share on all those places. I appreciate all your support. And if you need a Bible rebound, I keep forgetting to plug this. Maybe I'll do a little more of a formal, maybe I can make like a little ad for myself like they do on other podcasts, right? Do a little, now our sponsor, New Ken Bible Rebinding, and no, because it's my own thing. But if you need a Bible rebound, newkenbiblerebinding.com. I have some openings. My business has been pretty good lately. I've been pretty much continually working on rebinding people's old Bibles that are falling apart, bringing them back into great condition with a beautiful new Bible cover. New Ken Bible Rebinding. I should make a little thing that pops up like I do with these iTunes and Spotify. But anyway, thank you a lot, everyone, for watching, and God bless, and see you next time. We are out.